Okay, I don't think you guys are even going to believe this story, but it's 100% true. Just happened last week. I don't know how else I could even preface this dumpster fire of a story, but here it goes. I'm a 22-year-old male and I live with my fiancée. We had a nice apartment, but we were really looking to buy a house. I know, a little young for that, but we both landed really nice jobs after college and figured that it's better to get it out of the way now and start settling down. We're kind of old-fashioned like that. My fiancée's grandmother owns a home and no one lives in it. She had it for about a year since a family relative passed away. No one wanted anything to do with it since there was a lot of work that needed to be done, like painting the walls and redoing the floors and just various tasks like that. It wasn't completely horrible inside, but there was enough work that it literally sat there for a good little while. Well, my fiancé and I started talking to her grandmother after buying the place. She told us that she would sell it to us for a low enough price that we would be able to afford all of the renovations and whatnot. We were really excited about it. It was really exciting to think we were going to have purchased our first home together so shortly after graduating from college. But here was the problem. She had a lot of people in her family who started feeling left out. It was my fiancé's aunt and her two sons. Their father had died shortly after the second son was born, and the mother had a hard time coping with everything. She was a regular drinker and arguably an alcoholic. My fiancé told me that they were extremely negative people, and after meeting them a few times at family functions, I was surprised at how right she was. They lived in government housing. She collected disability fraudulently, and her two sons didn't work, despite one being 24 and the other being 19. There were whispers of drug abuse in there too. Suffice to know that these were not the kind of people you wanted to associate with. When word got out that we were buying the house from her grandma, they started feeling really left out. There were a few occasions where they'd try offering to watch the house, very obviously an attempt to get in there and do God only knows what. We politely declined and did everything we could to avoid them. I happened to be at the house one day. My fiancé was working and I work remotely online, so I was home alone. I had just walked down the street to buy a lemonade when I saw someone at her house. It was extremely unexpected. I got ready to confront a potential burglar when I noticed it was my fiancé's cousin trying to break in. He was startled when he saw me and froze for a minute. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me something about thinking he saw a car he didn't recognize in the driveway. I explained that it was my car, and he left without any big confrontation. As he walked away, though, I heard him start cursing under his breath. This was the point when I started feeling like we had something to worry about. Not feeling safe inside your own home is the worst feeling ever, especially being two young recent college graduates. We both worked really hard to make this happen, and the idea that it made us feel unsafe there really bothered us. I still didn't even understand what they wanted out of the whole ordeal. They didn't have enough money to afford the property tax alone. Forget about utilities and anything else. About 2 weeks went by without any kind of confrontation. I had falsely convinced myself that they'd finally leave us alone. I was dead wrong. We went to McDonald's one day, exactly 1 week ago today, the day I'm writing this. Me and my fiancé both just wanted to be out of the house for a little while. Considering we were in the process of buying a house, we didn't want to go eat anywhere expensive, so McDonald's just seemed like a logical decision. Now before I continue, I feel the need to explain something about my fiancé and I. We are normally very serious people. We work very hard and we're both kind of workaholics, but when we get together to have some fun, we go hard. Work hard, play hard, right? Well, we got kind of silly when we played. Let me cut to the chase. We were both playing in the ball pit at our local McDonald's. We always enjoyed goofing off like that, and we weren't too concerned with what people would think of us. We'd only been messing around for 5 minutes when her cousin showed up at McDonald's too. It was creepy. He walked right in, looked at us the entire time. Before he even opened the front door, his eyes were stuck on us, and they felt heavy. My fiancée immediately knew something was wrong when my facial expression changed and she darted around to see what I was looking at. We both watched as her cousin made his way out to the ball pit. He stepped outside. As he walked, he moved his body to grab something out of his pocket. I couldn't see what it was, but my first thought was a gun or a knife. The look in his eyes told me he was out to do serious harm. He jumped into the ball pit in my direction. I luckily landed one solid punch in his face as he came down. It threw him off. I had an advantage. He kicked me in the stomach, but I landed a few more punches on his face. He started screaming for me to stop and that I was killing him. I would have kept going if my fiancée hadn't been watching. He started this, not me. We got out of the ball pit. He then began telling us that he was going to press charges on me for assaulting him. I wasn't even fazed by this. There were plenty of witnesses there that had seen the whole thing transpire. I started telling him that I was calling the cops and I was going to press charges on him. He got really panicked and ran back to his car and drove off. I'm not going to lie to you. This whole thing really shook me up. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I looked around online and found an easy solution: a restraining order. My fiancée and I had both gotten restraining orders on her aunt and her two cousins. I didn't know why we didn't think of this sooner. It really solved the issue, and once they understood that we had a restraining order against them, they buggered right off. I haven't seen or heard from them since. And thankfully, and hopefully, that's the end of my story. A little background on me. I'm a 19-year-old male and I was traveling with my girlfriend. We were on a road trip to visit my grandparents who lived a few states away. They said we could stay at their place for a few weeks over the summer, and it seemed like a no-brainer because they lived on the beach. The path to getting there, though, was really long and it was a painful drive. My girlfriend and I both disliked driving, but we figured that we could take turns and it wouldn't be so miserable. I think the total time on the road was about 10 hours. We were about 5 hours into the drive when we decided to stop off at a rest stop. I'm not going to lie to you. We stopped quite a bit. I'm a little compulsive with drinking water because I like to stay hydrated. As you might imagine, there are some consequences of being hydrated. It irritated my girlfriend, but not very much. I think she secretly liked that we were stopping on my sake and not hers, because she always seemed to buy something every time we stopped. This one rest area was not horrible or anything. Wasn't in a bad area or anything like that. It seemed like a very typical, safe rest stop. But this is where one of the most horrifying experiences of my life took place, at least the first part of it. This has simply been one of the many times when I had to pull off the road to go pee. When I saw that there was also a McDonald's near this one rest area, I decided to wait until we got there. I normally don't eat McDonald's, but I let myself do it on special occasions like road trips. It makes the drive go by a little better, even if it makes my stomach feel like garbage. So, I went to the bathroom and she bought more cigarettes. We had already made our way to the McDonald's when we had our first appearance with Creepy Guy. We actually did talk to him a little bit. Let's call him Joe. Joe may have been the strangest looking man I'd ever laid my eyes on. He looked like he didn't come from this country or something, and not on a racial basis or anything. He just looks like he had a completely different lifestyle, as if he lived off the land and had never used electricity. His beard went all the way down to his stomach, and if you looked at it for long enough, you could see food particles in there, and some of them not even from a meal that he had eaten that day. So that should give you a good idea of his level of cleanliness. The rest of his outfit followed suit. A dark pair of jeans that look like they hadn't been washed in a decade, and a large leather jacket that looks like the oldest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm sure it actually wasn't that old, but it had a timely appearance to it due to it being in such poor condition. Anyway, we spoke to Joe because he awkwardly sat next to us at McDonald's. I thought this was extremely strange, and it definitely weirded me out. I'm an introvert by nature, and talking to people is extremely taxing. My girlfriend is an extrovert and always attracted people that were interested in conversation. I just found it strange because I've never had someone randomly sit at the same table as me when they were complete strangers. I figured that it was because my girlfriend attracted talkers, but looking back, it was probably because we appeared to be easy targets. Joe sat down right next to my girlfriend and started asking us where we were going. My girlfriend, being the optimistic and unsuspecting person that she is, gave him the entire story, that we were basically 5 hours away from anyone that we knew in any direction. I tried to give her a look that she needed to shut up, but she didn't get the hint. We had already ordered our food and we were eating when he sat down. He didn't order anything. He just invited himself to our table and talked to us for the entire time we were there. At first he was rather polite, but had a really thick accent that didn't seem like it belonged anywhere. I couldn't tell you where the accent came from because I've never heard anything like it in my life, and this is coming from someone who knows plenty of people from the North, Midwest, the South, Australia, and anywhere else. This accent just didn't seem like it came from Earth. After a painful experience of trying to get away from Joe, we got back in our car and started up on that journey again. As we got to our car, I also noticed that Joe had gotten into his car as well. As we had pulled out, Joe was a good distance away from us. I thought this was extremely strange, and the warning sign in my head went from flashing to high alert. I knew that we were in some kind of danger. I was driving and I tried putting the pedal to the metal. The next half hour or so, I had probably sped more than I did my entire life. I was normally a really safe driver, but this guy was really freaking me out. I tried telling my girlfriend that this guy was tailing us, but she didn't believe me. She thought I was just being paranoid. But what are the odds of seeing this guy at a gas station and then him being behind us for 30 minutes after we got on the road? She told me to pull over at the next rest stop and we would know for sure if he was trying to do us harm. Stupidly, that's exactly what I did. And my worst suspicion was true. He pulls off at the same rest stop and parked right next to us. My adrenaline was rushing as I got ready to fight this guy. I didn't know what else I could do. I told my girlfriend to call the police and then I got out of the car. He was easily a foot taller than me, and he was a little older and probably not in the best shape. I had the benefit of being an athlete wannabe at my college. I did all the intramural sports stuff like that, so I was in pretty decent shape, but none of that mattered when Joe pulled out a knife. The understanding that he was out to do us harm and I was going to have to fight him. I waited for him to approach. About 30 seconds went by before he started walking in my direction. My heart was pounding. I started screaming every insult that I could. I called him a degenerate and an old man who was in way over his head, and then I was about to whoop him. It didn't scare him though, and when he got within 10 feet of me, I thought it would be a good idea to tackle him. I was hoping to take him by surprise, but I didn't. I tried getting him off of his feet and onto the floor, but when I tackled him, he plunged the knife right into my back. But that was the only good hit he got on me. I managed to get him on the floor, and after that, I started kicking his head ferociously. I don't know how I managed to do it, but he was on the ground seemingly unconscious, and I was standing there. I could feel the blood flowing down my back, and I got back into the back seat of my car and yelled at my girlfriend to drive me to the nearest hospital. I was questioned a few days later at the hospital about what had happened. I guess the police showed up after we had left and found Joe still there unconscious. He was in a coma, and the police didn't know what to think. Once they got mine and my girlfriend's version of the story, they seemed to believe it, and so that was that. I don't know when or if Joe will ever wake up from that coma. And honestly, after he almost killed me, I kinda hope he doesn't. That was an extremely traumatic experience for me and my girlfriend. The good news about the situation is that I can tell people that I put someone in a coma once, and if they don't listen to me, they're next. I'm not sure if this is the creepiest or the most disgusting thing to ever happen to me, but here it is. I'm a 17-year-old female, and this happened about 3 months ago. Me and my friends always liked to go to McDonald's after we had a good yoga session. You could call us regulars. We probably did yoga together 2 or 3 times a week, and it wasn't a class or anything. It was just me and 3 of my friends. We had another friend, Olivia, who occasionally joined us, but she was kind of flaky. If she didn't feel like doing yoga that day, we just went ahead and did it without her. We had been in this routine for a couple of weeks at this point, and we always looked forward to getting some nice junk food. There was something about McDonald's that was like the guilty pleasure of my entire existence. I normally didn't get it otherwise, but I really looked forward to the couple of occasions that me and my friends went there. But this one experience was horrible. I had been there enough that I started to recognize the people that worked there. I never had conversations with them, but I knew their faces well enough to spot when someone new was in the back working. That's exactly what happened this one Wednesday afternoon. I noticed this guy with really thin hair. He had a really creepy face, and I'm not sure how to describe it exactly. His eyes were humongous. They looked like the eyes of a bug. And then he had this really strange body language that always kind of freaked me out. It was like jumpy or something. If he was deep frying French fries, for example, he would stand perfectly still for a second, and then really quickly submerge them in one motion, and it would splash grease all over. This was very unusual considering I had seen enough people put down fries that there was an easier way he could have done that. He didn't have to splash it like that. I was watching him one day and we made eye contact. It was really unusual too because I was looking at him as my mom's credit card was processing to pay for my meal. He had his back turned toward me. I was trying to figure out if I knew who he was, and then he just spun around to look at me, and it was all in one motion. It was just really freaky. So I started noticing him more and more. He was always working whenever my friends and I got finished with our yoga. It didn't bother me too much. My friends also noticed how weird he was and told me about similar experiences. It wasn't creepy enough that we stopped going or anything, but it was certainly enough to notice. I remember the day in particular. It was a weekend because I didn't have school that day. Me and my friends had just finished a really good yoga session and we headed over to McDonald's. Anyway, my friends and I ordered our food and were waiting for a few minutes. It took a little bit longer than usual, which isn't really an issue because we're not impatient or anything. But here was the weird part. They weren't busy. We were basically the only people in there waiting for food, and I think they had one other person who had already ordered who was sitting down and already eating. I didn't see any cars in the drive-thru, and I just found the whole situation extremely bizarre. I had noticed that the creepy guy was working, but I didn't see him for a very long time. He went behind a wall that I couldn't see him around, and I wasn't sure why he did this either. Life went on, and we got our food and sat down. I normally start by eating my fries and then have whatever my main meal is after that. Today it happens to be chicken nuggets. I got a 10-piece. As I was eating, I felt that creepy guy's watchful eyes looming over us. I felt really freaked out, and I convinced my friends to take our meal into the car to leave. As we left, I looked back to see him frowning at me. I didn't stop walking. Well, we got out there, and for a few minutes I felt like I was being paranoid and I overreacted. My friends thought so too, until I looked at my chicken nuggets. I looked inside of the box they were in, and they seemed to be covered in some kind of weird substance. I couldn't quite make it out, and I didn't know what to think. My immediate reaction was that they had put mayonnaise on it or something. Thankfully, I was smart enough to ask my friends before I took a bite. My one friend screamed, "That freak jizzed on your nuggets." The more I analyzed this strange substance on my chicken nuggets, the more convinced I became that it really was, in fact, that. That certainly explains why it had taken so long for us to get our food. I didn't quite understand how he was able to pull it off, though. He was one of at least 5 other workers there. It's not like they would have just allowed him to do this, right? Whatever the case may have been, I didn't feel comfortable eating those chicken nuggets, and I threw them out without hesitation. My friends and I were all really freaked out that this had happened to us. My friends threw out the rest of their food just to be on the safe side. We weren't really sure if we should have reported this incident to the police or something. We really didn't know what to do. We just kind of laughed it off as being one of those crazy life experiences, and that was it. I haven't gone back to McDonald's since this whole experience. But yeah, that's the story of how I ordered chicken nuggets one time, and the freaky guy working there put his secret sauce on them. I was 19 years old at the time. I had a really good opportunity to go to college, but things fell through a couple of months into it, and basically, I wasn't allowed to go back at that college. I'm not going to go into the details, but I found myself stuck. I was living at home with my parents and working at McDonald's most of the time. I was really disappointed in myself, especially because I didn't have anyone else to blame but myself. I seemed to be your typical college dropout that ended up working at fast food. But while I was working there, I had a couple of really strange experiences. So the first one happened like this. There was this really creepy customer. He was an old man, and he just seemed like the most insane individual ever. You just have to think of the physical embodiment of Florida man. He always wore this bathroom robe with a stained white t-shirt underneath. Or shoes. He had these really old Nikes that seemed like they had been completely covered in mud and never washed. Everywhere he stepped, there was some residue coming off of his shoes. I don't know how far he lived, but this guy came in to eat at McDonald's 4 or 5 times a day for as long as I worked there. I never personally had any horrible experiences with him. It wasn't like he was this unruly customer. He always asked for extra ketchup, but it's not like that was a crime or anything. The story is weird because I remember talking about him with some of my coworkers. I had one friend there that I became rather close with. I remember talking with her about this creepy guy that had just came in to eat McDonald's all the time wearing his pajamas. When you work with the public, there are so many people and faces that you see all the time, and none of them mean anything. It's just another customer. But when you have someone like this, it almost makes the job a little bit more bearable. As weird as that might sound, a little bit more consistency to the job. Plus, making jokes about someone like that was kind of fun. But there was one day when the jokes weren't funny anymore, because he stopped coming in. They couldn't find out why either. I mean, when you see someone multiple times a day, every day for months on end, you get a little surprised when they stop showing up. It all just seemed, I don't know, unusual. I remember talking to my friend about it. Neither of us could imagine why he stopped. I remember getting a phone call at 2 a.m. that night, though. I guess my friend had gotten curious and looked around online. She's a bit of an insomniac. I guess he had been arrested on multiple drug charges. She had found a picture of him in the public database for our county's police department. In the mugshot, he was wearing that exact same bathrobe that we always saw him wearing. That was interesting. Really weird to think that someone I saw and interacted with multiple times a day was an actual dealer. But I guess that was that. My other experience working at McDonald's was really bad. Not going to lie to you, it really freaks me out and really made me question humanity. So it happened like this, right? I was working the graveyard shift. It must have been around 12 a.m. and we didn't have any customers. We already cleaned all the machines as much as we could, and there really wasn't anything to do. We lived in a smaller community, so there weren't too many people coming in to eat at such a late hour. We had a few here and there, but we were mostly just sitting around, particularly slow this night. I remember going over to check the garbage cans for the other side of the store. Occasionally, we would forget to empty that garbage pail. It was directly behind a booth and out of sight from the area we normally worked in. I remember going over there, and there were 2 big bags of garbage that needed to be taken out. They were too heavy to take out at the same time, so I did what any sane person would do. I carried one out at a time. I remember bringing the first one. I threw it into the dumpster, and I remember hurting my back a little when I did it. I went for a little bit of a theatrical throw and really felt it there. I went back into the store to get the second bag of garbage, and I made my way outside. I got about 10 feet away from the dumpster when I saw something that shocked me. I dropped the bag of garbage. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a mutilated puppy. Its entire snout had been cut off. I wasn't sure if it was alive or not. It wasn't moving or anything. I took a step closer to try to see a little bit more, and I just felt my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most horrifying thing I'd ever seen in person. It was definitely dead. It wasn't leaning up against the dumpster, and it was just a horrifying thing to see. I ran back inside and asked my coworkers what we should do. We decided to call the police, but they didn't really help much. We were really freaked out at who could have possibly done this and why they would put the puppy there of all places. The part that still freaks me out is that whoever had done this had been waiting for me to go back inside of the building, and in the few seconds before I came back out, put it right next to the dumpster. I figured they must have been watching me. Didn't know what else to think about it though. Our McDonald's didn't have an outside camera other than the drive-thru, so there was no hope of trying to identify the person that did this. But it still makes me sick to my stomach to think what that person could be like. This story happened a couple of years ago, about 8 years ago actually. I was 10 years old at the time, and it's the reason I haven't gone back to McDonald's for nearly a decade. I never plan on going back there again, actually. The story itself is pretty unbelievable, but it is what it is. You didn't have to live through it, but I did. My mother worked a really decent job in the city. My father was out of the picture, so that left my brother and I to be taken care of by our grandparents most of the time. That's not the worst thing in the world. My grandparents are the best. But my grandmother is kind of a health freak. This meant that we weren't allowed to have any kind of sweets, soda, junk food, or anything else that was tasty. Their house was always a lot of fun, but we never got to enjoy the food that we really wanted. So whenever my brother and I were with our mom, we tried talking her into bringing us to McDonald's. We loved going there. I particularly loved the French fries, chicken nuggets with a milkshake. I got that every single time I went. It was my absolute favorite. But as much as I loved that meal, this one experience was so bad that I never wanted it again. And it goes like this. My mom had gotten off of work a little early this one day and picked us up at 4:30 in the afternoon. This meant that she was going to be able to have some time to bring us to McDonald's, which we had been begging her to do. We made our way there, and I remember singing some goofy song on the radio as we drove there. My brother and I were so excited, and my mom was happy that she could make us happy. My mom was not a fan of eating in the car. She really liked her car and wanted to keep it clean, which meant no eating, so we went inside to eat. When we were in there, everything went just as you'd expect. We ordered our food, sat down, and ate. That's all there really was to it. The bad part didn't come until we started to leave. We were making our way out of the McDonald's when a Hispanic man with a really strange mustache started saying something to my mom. I remember him being somewhat incoherent because of a thick accent, and many of the words were ones that I had never heard before. I immediately identified this man as problematic and could tell by his body language that he might be a threat. But after all, I was only 10 years old and couldn't do a whole lot. My mom got my younger brother into the car, put his seatbelt on, and closed the door. She told me to get into the car too. I can tell by her panicked tone of voice that she was extremely worried by this guy. No matter what he said, she didn't reply. My mom got into the driver's seat and started the car in the same motion and then went to close her door. But by this point, the man was already close enough that he could hold the door open and stop it from being closed. My mom started telling this guy to back off, but he only got more aggressive. He started saying stuff like, "You can run from me, chica," and other stuff like that. That was one of the only phrases I remember him saying. Again, a lot of it was incoherent to me. My mom never did get her door closed until she started backing out anyway, and knocked this guy onto the floor. I guess he wasn't expecting her to actually go, but this only antagonized him even more. I remember watching him as my mom was peeling off. He got back up immediately and ran to his car, which was only about 4 parking spots away. He started it and started following us. He wasn't trying to run us off the road or anything, but he was definitely following us. I remember asking my mom what we were going to do. She said that I had to be quiet and let her think. Well, we drove around for about 20 minutes. I could tell that it wasn't the path to go home that we always took. I remember it feeling like a really long time that we were on the road. The sun started to go down and we all felt a lot of tension. My mom eventually had the good idea to go to the police station. She called the police on her cell phone before she got there and told them about the situation. When we got there were policemen waiting in the parking lot. Despite there being cops all over the place, this guy still followed us, parked right behind us, and got out of the car, running at my mom. It was honestly terrifying. Thankfully, a police officer had tackled him and they took care of him from there. They put him into handcuffs and took him somewhere into the station. They eventually brought us in and asked us questions about what had actually happened. My mom told them the whole story from start to finish, and then we went home. It was really scary to experience as a kid, and I still think about it sometimes. The craziest part is that this guy was confident enough to still go after my mom with police around in front of a police station. I don't know what kind of judgment he had, but whatever it was probably impaired by drugs or something. A couple of weeks later, a lawyer had contacted my mom. He was trying to prosecute this guy for multiple crimes. He claimed that this guy who had tried to abduct my mother was actually a leader in some kind of gang. It wasn't MS-13 or anything, but it was a fairly significant street gang in our area. My mom told him no because it would mean putting herself and her kids in danger. She knew that there was going to be a risk of testifying against a gang member, and she didn't trust the police officers to keep her safe. My mom didn't tell me that last part until a couple of years later. I must have been about 15 years old when she finally told me. I totally understood why she refused. I'm not sure whatever happened to this gang member, but he did a really good job of intimidating people into not testifying against him. I can't even imagine the kind of person this guy was, though. Imagine going to McDonald's, seeing a mother with 2 kids, and then wanting to abduct her, and then being crazy enough to follow her on the road for a half hour and park behind her in front of a police station. And even then, he still got out of the car and ran toward my mom. I don't know what happened to that guy to make him like that. I just seriously hope that this prosecutor was eventually able to get him on something and locking him up for life. I don't know how people like that are able to roam the streets so freely. This happened a couple of years ago. I was a freshman in college, my second semester. I was kind of a loner, if I'm going to be honest with you. Still am. At the time, I had a small YouTube channel here where I made enough money that I didn't have to work a regular job. Most college students had to work fast food or whatever, and I was fortunate enough to not be one of them. Don't get me wrong. I was poor and still lived with my parents, but I made enough online that I was comfortable enough. I remember my schedule was pretty hectic this second semester. I had a really long day on Friday. Every Friday, my first class was at 7 a.m., and my last class of the day was at 4 p.m. There were a couple of hours between classes throughout the day, and I think I had about 4 in total. I lived too far from college to be able to justify driving back home, so I just kind of had to wait around on campus all day long. It was only about 4 weeks into the semester when I was really tired of this routine already. I seriously thought about dropping one of the classes, but I figured that it was going to be worth it if I could graduate when I planned to. At the end of this particular Friday, I was starving. I didn't like to eat anything on campus because I didn't really trust the staff. I know that might be bad to say, but there was this one time that I ordered food from the cafeteria on campus and got food poisoning. They're a little infamous on campus, and there are a few people that regularly eat there. Understandably so. I just found myself waiting until I got out of class to eat. And then I can eat somewhere that I actually wanted to. I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to eat after class, and I just settled on grabbing some McDonald's on the way. I was originally planning on picking up some at the drive-thru, but I also had to really go to the bathroom by the time I got there. I just figured it would be easier to go in and order inside. I always found it difficult to order at the drive-thru anyway. I had a hard time understanding what people were saying through the microphone, so I got in there, ordered my food, and I was good to go. I was just going to bring it into my car and eat as I drove home, but I noticed something weird going on. Right outside of the McDonald's, two people were having an argument. They looked like they were around my age, probably late high schoolers or college students themselves. I stood there for a moment watching to see if the argument between these two people escalated, and it did. The man started holding the girl's arms down and pinned her against the car. I was assuming it was one of their cars. I wasn't sure if they were together or what the situation really was. I didn't really want to intervene because it was somebody else's drama and not really my problem, but I got more and more anxious about the girl's safety. This guy was a lot bigger than her. He at least had a foot of height, and he looked like he was an athlete. I stood there for a few more minutes watching to see what was going to happen. I couldn't really hear what they were saying, but I understood that this situation was getting worse. It eventually got to the point when he opened the car door and threw her inside. I mean, literally pushed her and flung her inside the car. She didn't scream or anything, but it looked very startling. Made me jump a little bit, and then he went inside the car too. They were in the back seat, and I immediately got suspicious when he closed the car door behind him. I heard the girl start screaming from inside the car and immediately knew that I had to do something. I put my McDonald's food down on the sidewalk and then ran over to the car. I opened the car door, and he was very obviously surprised that I had done so. I saw that he was about halfway through taking off his belt. I punched him in the back, and this antagonized him. He struggled to get out of the car so that he could fight me. Thankfully, there were a few other people who had gotten involved before me and him had a go at it. There were two older men in their 40s who happened to be walking into the McDonald's that turned around and came over to help. When the other people started getting involved, he got anxious and just got in his car and drove away. I asked the girl what had happened. She told me that she didn't know that guy and he was just some random freak that wanted to use her. She claimed that he asked her to do it, but when she declined, he started getting confrontational about it, and I guess that was when I had noticed what was going on. This guy wasn't very smart. We were eventually able to identify him, and he was eventually charged with assault. The situation could very easily have been bad. If I hadn't intervened, he may have been able to do God knows what to this poor girl. It's crazy to think that such a horrible crime was almost committed in such a public place. I mean, people are always at McDonald's. The thought that someone could even attempt such a violent and repulsive act in public like that blows my mind. The girl thanked me profusely as I had just saved her a lot of physical and psychological torment. I told her that I didn't do anything special and that I was just trying to do the right thing. I witnessed someone end their life at McDonald's. It happened a couple of years ago, and I don't really like to think about it too much. I thought sharing my story with people online would make it a little easier, so here it is. This is kind of my attempt to make peace with the situation, and I hope that the soul of this poor man is resting in peace. I don't remember a lot of the details. It all seems really fuzzy, like it was all just a bad dream that never should have happened. I do remember some stuff, though. I remember it was raining. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. I remember that I had just finished working overtime, so it was pretty late. I wanted to grab a quick bite to eat, but didn't feel like eating in my car. I always hate doing that, especially because of the smell, so I went in. I got a Big Mac from McDonald's. I was sitting in the corner of the store when I noticed a really tall man walk inside. He was dressed in standard winter clothes and had a long blue hat on. There was a lot of empty space inside of the hat on top of his head, and I don't remember exactly why it caught my attention. I watched him for a few minutes. I wasn't particularly interested. I was just sitting there eating and didn't really have anything else to look at. My phone was dead, and he was the only other customer in the McDonald's at the time. His body language stood out to me, though. I could tell that he was not in a good frame of mind. I mean, looking at this guy for a minute told you everything you needed to know about him. He was suffering and in a lot of pain. I'm not sure exactly what kind of pain. I could only make guesses. Maybe his wife had left him. Maybe his kids died. I'll never know what happened to him. All I will ever know is that it was bad enough to push him to the very edge, and enough to make him jump off. He stood in front of the cashier for a few minutes while he appeared to be looking at the menu. To this day, I don't know if he was actually considering ordering anything or if he was just waiting for the right moment to. So this was the layout of the store. On one side of the McDonald's, there was the counter where people could order their food, but the counter area didn't take up the entire wall. There was a separation between that and a small hallway that brought you to the bathrooms. I was on the other side of the McDonald's looking on. He had been standing there for a few minutes when he randomly decided to start walking down the hallway. He moved really slowly, like he was really trying to take his time. Step by step, he came closer and closer to death. And the weirdest part about the whole situation was that he didn't seem sad. Didn't feel like he was depressed. It was more of an apathy, like he had suffered so much that he just didn't care anymore, couldn't bring himself to bother with being alive. I don't know. Maybe I just feel that way after having thought about this experience so much over the last few years. As he continued down the hallway, he got slower with each step, finally coming to a halt in front of the men's bathroom. He stood there for about 45 seconds. I'm not sure what he was planning on doing. My first reaction was that there was some kind of sign in front of the men's bathroom that it was closed, but that wasn't the case. I saw him pull something out of his coat pocket. He very slowly pointed it at his head. It was a pistol. It wasn't until I heard the gunshot that it registered what was happening. I saw blood go all over the place. His body fell to the floor with a thud. I screamed. I didn't know what else to do. I remember vomiting everything I had just eaten on what was left of my meal. If I hadn't been so disturbed, I would probably have been extremely grossed out. But I was in an absolute state of shock. I started speaking with one of the employees after a few minutes had gone by. He screamed what had happened. I told him that he pulled a gun out of his pocket and shot himself with it. One of the employees there was convinced that he had been shot by someone else, strongly hinting that it was me. I didn't quite understand why they thought so. Some disgruntled old woman, she was old, and told the police that she didn't think that the guy ended his own life. Whatever her motivation was, it really didn't matter. The police didn't take her very seriously from the start, and this obviously was done by his own doing. The security tapes proved as much. I'm not going to lie. It really bothered me that she had to make an already bad situation worse. I already answered some of the questions from the police officers about the story. I remember driving home that night. I remember how alone I felt. This had really taken a toll on me. I pray for that guy's soul every day. I really hope he's in a better place. I can't imagine how horrible things must have been for him that he would have offed himself in a public place like that. I haven't eaten out since this whole experience. I have the strange fear that I'm going to witness another one in public like that. I know it's not rational, but I definitely feel that way. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why this happened, and I probably never will. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.